Hey everyone, it's Presley of ActOutGames.com here, and today we're doing a Presley's perspective on the first Democratic debate of this year.
So I think what we're going to do is, well, I know what we're going to do because we're sitting here doing it. It's too late to change our minds now. We're going to watch, Preston and I are going to watch the debate together. And we're not going to talk about, like for the first pass, we're not going to talk about kind of what's going on in the debate. Because they're talking about a lot of things, certainly I think are probably a little over your head. Like you probably don't know everything that's going on in Syria and like some of the other things that they're talking about you don't know the details of. And so I thought instead of us kind of having a conversation as it's going on, I'd be interested to see like if Presley just watches the debate knowing what she knows and not knowing what she doesn't know, like what she thinks about how people are performing in the debate, right? And so we're going to watch like half-hour chunks and then come down here and shoot a little bit of video real quick while things are still fresh, instead of kind of trying to watch a whole 2 hours or whatever and then remember everything that happened, right? Because it's a lot to take in, right? So we've watched the first 30 minutes of the debate, and so far they've really been talking about Syria and gun control for the most part, and whether or not we should have went into Iraq and done some things there.
I have no idea what's going on in Syria, but I do know about gun control. So.
Yeah, and I saw a really cool video today on Syria that's a nice little summary, and we'll watch that later. Okay. So we will go back and talk about all of these things, and then we'll see how that changes Presley's opinion. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. So tell us what you think about the first 30 minutes so far.
Okay, so the first 30 minutes, it's just really interesting to hear what everyone's opinions are on things that I know. Like the whole Syria thing, I'm just like, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah.
Something's happening, but I'm just going to assume something bad's happening.
Yeah, so I wonder though, like if, even without knowing exactly what's going on and what they're talking about, if listening to different people talk about it, if you feel like one of them feels like they're more in control of what's going on and kind of understands what we should do there, and if there's somebody you kind of trust on that issue, even though you don't understand exactly what they're talking about.
I don't think there is one person that I really trust on that issue, no. Like, if I knew what was going on, I could formulate an opinion on who I could trust.
That's very wise of you, Presley. You shouldn't necessarily just kind of gravitate towards somebody because you like the way that they speak and the authority with which they speak. It's good that you really want to understand what's happening before you pick somebody. I respect that. I think that's a good thing. Yeah,
like, you asked me this question like right after we finished watching while we were heading down here. Like if I had to vote for someone right now, like if I could legally vote, but if I had to vote for someone right now, and I had to go and vote for somebody
that's in this debate, because there's a whole Republican series of debates going on too, but somebody that's in this debate, who would you pick right now?
I said I would, like, I was really confused, like I don't really know, but then you asked me who had the most opinions that I agreed on, and I mostly agreed on Bernie Sanders' opinions, because he was talking about how mentally ill people should, like, no matter how poor they are, should be able to afford mental health care.
Right.
And that's a very important thing.
It is.
As well as not all the money should be going to the top 1% of people.
Right. So those are definitely big things of his.
Yes.
Like income inequality, it's kind of what that's called. Like a lot of the money goes to the top 1% or the top 0.1%. And the difference between the top 1% and the bottom 1% or the bottom 50% is the bigger that gap is, there's a bigger inequality between those things. And he definitely wants to bring equality. And you like that?
Yeah, I like the fact that we should have, like, equality through that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, I figured you would probably lean a little towards Bernie Sanders, and he's certainly the Tumblr candidate, like we've talked about many times. Yes. I do think, like, I sense a little bit, and this is the last thing, and then we'll go watch some more debate, but I sense a little bit going on where, and this is something that's been made me a little uncomfortable recently, when people start talking about some of these, like the mass shootings or the things that are going wrong. People sort of go to mental health like really quickly, right? And while, I mean, there's this whole thing about just almost by definition, someone who would do something like that is mentally ill in some way, right? Because it's a normal, sane person.
But probably not always the case. That might not always be the case.
It might, like those people may not always be mentally ill, although, like I said, you could probably argue that anyone who would do that is mentally ill in some way. But more importantly, not every mentally ill person is out committing mass murders and shooting people, and it's starting to become sort of this stigma.
But you should still get mental health care.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you're saying about everyone should be able to get care, right? But it feels like that is always coming up in the context of these mass shootings and the gun control debates, and you're starting to sort of stigmatize people like who have autism, Like it'll suddenly be a big story that one of the people who committed one of these shootings was autistic. Like in some way, autistic people are dangerous, and we should sort of go like, I don't want the conversation to kind of get too far towards stigmatizing like everybody who has any kind of a mental illness should be viewed as a risk of going off the rails and doing something horrendous like these other people have done.
No, that is just a weird opinion. Like, even for me to think about. That is a weird thing to think.
But like pay attention, like as for the rest of the debate, pay attention and see if every time they talk about mental illness, that they're talking about it in the context of someone doing something like that. Yeah. And if that's the case, they're starting to link those things together a little bit more than I'm totally comfortable with right this second.
Yeah,
but just so
like,
you know.
You shouldn't link those things together.
Right.
Like, the biggest I've seen is schizophrenic people and doing that kind of stuff. Like, not every schizophrenic person is, like, thinking about trying to kill people. That's not every schizophrenic person ever. And it's just kind of a weird thing to start linking mentally ill people to...
But there probably is a discussion about whether, if you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, should you not be allowed to own a gun? Like, should there be just for say, like, I mean, that's a whole different kind of a debate, right? But, like, starting to link those things together, I think, is a little, that's happening more than I'm totally comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I figured you'd probably be around Bernie right now. So right now, the first 30 minutes, Bernie Sanders, income inequality, trying to resolve income inequality, and making sure that people have access to mental health care, and health care in general, probably, regardless of their income levels. That's where you're at right now.
Yeah, that's, like, that sounds like a good thing to happen.
Cool. Okay, well, let's go watch 30 more minutes and see if it changes your mind. Right.
Okay, so we just finished the next 30 minutes. And honestly, I have not much of an opinion because they were talking mostly about things that I have no idea what that were.
Yeah, well, not entirely. That's not entirely true. So they talked about Clinton's email scandal, which I guess you don't know.
I don't know.
Much about. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. And then they got into do Black Lives Matter or do All Lives Matter?
That I care about.
You know about that, and you care about that for sure.
Yes, but the rest of it is kind of like, I don't know.
Well, it's a big chunk of what we just watched. So what do you think about what everyone had to say about the Black Lives Matter thing?
Well, in my personal opinion, all lives matter.
Right.
Like, not... Like, black lives do matter, but what about the lives of other races that aren't just black people?
Right.
All lives matter, and I find it very shocking that actually almost one person said that all lives matter.
Well, yeah, okay, so we'll talk about this a little bit then. So I think that, like, people who say Black Lives Matter don't mean that Black Lives matter more than other lives, or that white lives or yellow lives don't matter, right? I think that, so I'll go with Bernie this time. Like, I thought his answer was really good in that, or even, was it O'Malley had a really good answer too about sort of saying that we have been undervaluing Black lives historically. And so Black Lives Matter, it means more, like it's, I mean, that's a catchy phrase, right? But it means more than Black Lives Matter and other lives don't, obviously, right? It means that we need to pay attention and stop undervaluing Black lives.
I think actually they're both true, though.
No, they're absolutely both true. Certainly from a literal standpoint, they're both absolutely true, right? But the all lives, white lives matter, the all lives matter movement sort of came up as a counter argument to the Black Lives Matter argument. And so most people, I don't want to say most, a lot of people who are saying all lives matter, when they hear Black Lives Matter, they say all lives matter, they're sort of dismissing the Black Lives Matter argument. Oh, okay. Right? And
that's so not what I thought.
Look, I totally understand, right? So that's connotation of, like, these things carry lots of meaning behind them that aren't just in the words themselves. And so you're watching it, and part of the reason we're sort of doing this whole experiment is you're watching it with what you know, and so you hear the words that they say, and you're responding to the words that they say, but it's interesting that in certain cases, like, there's a lot of baggage that those words carry a lot of meaning that you don't know about if you haven't sort of been following some of these things. And so, all lives matter has sort of become this counter statement to the Black Lives Matter argument that is sort of dismissing the Black Lives Matter argument in some ways.
Okay, right? I didn't realize that's what I...
right.
What I meant by all lives matter is people, like, everyone should deserve to not have to worry about their relatives, loved ones, or even themselves just getting by hate crimes.
Of course.
Because of the race.
Absolutely.
That's what I meant by it.
From the words, I think you're absolutely right. But I think what they were asking is should we be paying extra attention and stop devaluing Black lives?
We should.
And not sort of dismissing that argument by saying, no, all lives matter. You shouldn't be paying, well, whatever. So yeah, that's baggage, right? One thing I wanted to ask you too before we stop is, and then like tomorrow, I think the next block that we're going to watch has to do with income inequality, which is something you mentioned before that you cared about. So we'll definitely dig in that a little bit. Were you surprised by the fact that they mentioned that the United States has more people in jail than any other country? Even like China or even these countries that we think are terrible and dictatorships and stuff, we put more people in prison.
I did not know that.
Right.
Like, I didn't know that. And I have heard more recently, I can't remember where or when or where, but that we just put people in prison because we think that they did it, and we don't have much evidence. I've heard that somewhere, that some of the people that we put in prison, we don't have evidence just because of their race. Yeah,
so there's a little bit of a, we won't go too much into this either, but like the way that our jury system works, right? You have 12 people that are on a jury, and if the prosecution can convince those 12 people that the person did it, then that person's found guilty and they can go to jail, right? And so certainly, not all that long ago, but if you were in like a racist part of the country, or you had a sort of a racist community and you had 12 white people that were sitting on a jury and there was a black person that was accused of doing something, then they could certainly decide that that person did it because of their race. They could be biased, and there's nothing that stops them from doing that in our legal system, right? So people can make these determinations, right? As long as the people can agree on what happened. And so you read stories all the time about people that were convicted by a jury and went to jail, and then later we found out they were innocent.
Yeah.
Like back then, like when they're putting people in jail, we didn't have like the DNA evidence and even like fingerprinting in a lot of ways and stuff. And so they find out later, they run the DNA and they're like, oh, this person totally didn't do it, right? And so they didn't have evidence that the person did it because the person didn't do it, and there wasn't evidence that the person did it, right? But that person got convicted. And so the way our system...
We were talking about this. I think we were talking about this in Minneapolis.
We talked about the Innocence Project and the death penalty. Yeah, that's exactly right. We were talking about whether the death penalty should exist because if you make a mistake there, you can't undo it, right? And so, yeah, there's this thing called the Innocence Project that's what they do, is they go and look into old cases and look at new evidence and try and find out that people that are in prison are actually innocent and get them acquitted and get them out of jail, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some problems with the legal system. But I think there's just an inherent problem. If we incarcerate more people than anyone else in the world, we should probably be looking at that, right? That might be a problem, right? Did anyone in this second chunk of the debate sort of handle it better for you than anyone else, or did you change your opinion? You still think Bernie's doing good? Do you like anybody else?
I mean, I couldn't really get the grip of what everyone was 100% talking about, while I was listening to the debate, because I thought people who were Black Lives Matter were different than the All Lives Matter thing that actually is.
Right, so you were probably pretty surprised to hear people say Black Lives Matter as the answer to that question.
And I'm like, what? Oh, well, what are you talking? And then now
we'll have to watch that segment again. Now that you realize the baggage.
But yeah, they were talking about a lot of the stuff that was going on, like Syria, that I don't know.
The email stuff you don't know about yet.
Yeah, I don't really know about most of the stuff.
So you're still about where you were before.
I'm still about like these things that this person is talking about. That makes sense to me, and I like it. I approve of.
So hopefully the income inequality stuff in the next block, when we watch that, you'll understand a little bit more of that and follow a little bit more of that. Cool. All right, let's go do another block.
So we just watched our third block.
It's the next day. That's why we're dressed differently, and Presley's kind of sick all of a sudden. That didn't all happen in 30 minutes.
No. We didn't get dressed again in 30 minutes.
Right.
Neither did I get stocked up.
Right. Okay, so third block. Major topics of the discussion this time were more economic inequality, which you care about.
Yeah.
The big bank failures and bailouts, which you know nothing about.
What's going on.
And both just in general, like free college tuition, and whether illegal immigrants should have access to like in-state college tuition and healthcare through Obamacare. I think those are kind of the big things people talked about.
Okay.
What did you think about this chunk that we just watched? I know you didn't like grok a ton of what was happening because we haven't discussed it, but like part of the thing is I'm curious of your sort of cold opinions, and then we'll go back and talk more about these things.
Yeah. Well, I really I have heard a lot of people talking about like that their college is so expensive that they have to live off of like really like $1 food.
Yeah, like ramen.
And, yeah, like they have to make ramen every day just to like eat.
Sure, that's very true.
Like I mean, I think it should at least be like less expensive for people to get, because like what happens is people look down on less educated people, when really a lot of those people can't even get the education that they to become less looked down upon.
Yeah.
So like if it was free or not as expensive as it is now, then people wouldn't just be looked down upon because they had to like not go to college or drop out of something because it was too much money and they couldn't really live off of what they had. And I think, and people sometimes look down upon like college dropouts, but some people might have to have dropped out because it was too much money and they couldn't afford it.
Right, lots of people. Right.
And like that is not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing. Right.
Look down upon people who couldn't afford to get better education.
So I'm going to give kudos to Bernie Sanders again on one of the things that he said that I hadn't thought of it this way before. I've heard it said, and I think it's relatively true, that a college education today is like the equivalent of a high school education, like 50 years ago, let's say, like when my parents were sort of graduating. That it's sort of it gets your foot in the door, and it's sort of expected that you're going to have a college education.
Yeah.
And so he was sort of making the argument that like we don't pay for high school and grade school. Like, our taxes sort of fund those kinds of things. Taxes fund your education through high school, unless you go to a private school. That's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
But taxes sort of pay for you to go to high school, and they do that because we sort of as a society decided that everyone should have an education through high school.
So why don't people have an education through college?
Right, so is it different?
What it was,
yeah, right. That's exactly his point. Like, is that we as a society have sort of decided that anyone who wants one should have an education through the end of college because that's kind of the expectation now, then should tax dollars sort of go that way?
Yeah.
It was a good point. It was a really good point on Bernie's point. I give him kudos for that. I think for me, he's winning the debate right now. I like what he's doing in the debate. Like if you limit it to just what he's saying in the debate and what's going on in the debate, I think he's doing better than anyone else. If you bring in some like external knowledge and sort of other things about it, maybe not as much, but he may not be the candidate that I support the most. But in the debate, I think he's doing the best in the debate.
Yeah.
You still like Bernie? So with the debate so far, you're still on his side?
Yeah, like he seems to be making the most points that I like care about. Like I care about like the well-being of other people, and what he's talking about is mostly getting health care to other people that need it. Right. Like I think he was talking a little bit about getting mental health care to everyone that needs it. That was
in the last block he did that. Yep.
So like getting the health care that people need to survive,
and education
and
as well.
Education that people need, like not to be seriously harshly judged by everyone else.
Right.
Is an important thing to me. Like I think everyone should be able to get college education because it's now the expectation. Like it used to be the expectation that you would get a high school education, and then we made high school free. So now it's the expectation that you get a college if you graduate college, and a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people, like especially people who dropped out of college, like there are people who dropped out of college because they didn't have enough money to afford going to college, and like. That shouldn't be something to be. Shouldn't be something to be looked down upon, but it is. But if people could like not have to worry about hardly being like having to have this food like constantly, like maybe like no food almost at all, and just to not be harshly judged, like that shouldn't be a thing that's happening.
It's all about breaking cycles, right? Like we're in a good sort of cycle. Like our family, like we're a very privileged family. Like we live a very lucky life, and we've worked hard and we've put ourselves there in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of people who have worked very hard who haven't gotten the same opportunities that we've gotten, right? So it's not all about everyone works hard and they get the same opportunities and they got the chance to succeed. I'm editorializing a little bit. This is so like I think that you don't have the same, like we can send you to college, right? And so we went to college and we sort of succeeded and we've done things and we can keep that chain flowing because we can afford to send you and Cooper to college, and then you do well and you move on. And you've got the reverse of that cycle that happens in other families where the parents couldn't afford to go to college, and they're sort of scraping by and working and trying to make ends meet for their kids, and they're not going to be able to afford to send their kids to college, and then their kids aren't going to end up in the same careers, and they can't send their kids to college, and so it's just a cycle that sort of repeats itself. People who were in a good enough situation to go to college can send their kids to college. People who didn't can't, and people cross those barriers, of course. Like, it happens that people who couldn't go to college work their way up and can now afford to send their kids to college, and some people whose parent went to college end up in situations that prevent them from making enough money or living a life that lets them sit there. So there are people that cross, but in general, you sort of stay in these stratifications, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so if it were free for people, or taxpayer funded, like free was always kind of sketchy to me. It's not free. Like, it's, you raise taxes and everybody pitches in to pay for all the kids to be able to go to college. Like, to saying it's free is a little disingenuous, I think, in some ways. But you don't pay tuition. You just, everyone's tax dollars make it where everyone can go to school, right? And so that would help break those cycles. So I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, like people, like I said, looking down upon people for something that they couldn't even do is a really weird thing just to do. Like, so this person either didn't make it all the way through college because they couldn't afford it, or didn't go at all, and they're looked down upon and thought like that they were lesser educated because of that. And people should have been able to go and have the chance to be able to get this education that people like consider better than people who didn't get that.
I agree. Okay, let's go watch the last block. We got one more block to do. We'll do a wrap up, and then after this, like not as part of this video, of course, but I think we were just talking. I think we'll sit down and maybe even watch this debate again, and watch it very slowly, and talk through a lot of the issues and what's really happening and what's going on. And then we'll come back and do this again at the next Democratic debate and maybe the Republican debate here in a couple of weeks, and see how Presley's kind of viewpoints change over time as she sort of learns more about the current events. But so far, I think it's really fascinating just to hear her kind of talk a little bit about what she's seeing on the screen, not knowing a lot of the context for it, like the whole all life matter thing, right? Like, when you don't know that context, you sort of view things very differently. Awesome. Let's go watch. We just watched the closing statements, right? We finished the last block, watched the closing statements, so we're just going to make our closing statements real quick. We're going to let Presley make her closing statement real quick. So there's a bunch in there, like Patriot Act, Snowden, legalize marijuana, Veterans Affairs, I think was in that one a little bit, closing arguments, what enemy are you most proud of, which is kind of a weird question. Yeah, so what do you think? That's the end of the first debate.
Yeah, there was a lot in that debate that I didn't know about, but watching it again and knowing more about what's going on would probably help me understand more, like, who I would more support.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, based on the things that I know, like, based on the things that I care about, I like Bernie Sanders, but if I knew more about everything else, it might change my mind.
Yeah, so I think this is an excellent... yeah, I mean, we're sort of building a unit study here, right? I mean, we've talked about it before. This is kind of what we like to do. We're doing a unit study, and so the debates, clearly they're talking about what they think people care about, because they want people to vote for them, and like Anderson Cooper, who I love, is trying to ask questions that he thinks people want to know about, and the candidates are trying to do things that they think people want to know about, and so they... it's things you should probably know about, right?
Yeah.
And so I think using the debates as a unit study for, political science and for, just American history in a lot of cases and stuff, I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So we'll make this debate a unit study, and we'll go through it, like I said, sort of piece by piece, and I'll teach you more about what's happening in these issues. We'll do some research. I know there's some really good videos out there from our friends John and Hank. I've seen John Green talk about a lot of this stuff before, and I've seen Hank talk about some of this stuff before, so we'll watch some of their videos, we'll watch some other videos on YouTube, and we'll talk about it, and then when we watch the next debate, you'll come into it as like a better informed person, looking to see what you think.
Yeah.
Think it'll be fun? I think it'll be really cool, and I think it'll be cool for you guys to kind of see how Presley's ideas evolve over the course of the conversations. So if you guys watch the debate, let us know what you think. Who do you like? Who do you prefer? Who do you think did a good job in the debate? Who didn't do a good job and why? What issues are most important to you? Like, what things do you think we should talk to Presley about? If you have resources, like links to videos or people talking about things, put them down there. If they get sort of thrown in the, whatever it is, the quarantine area, because you put a link in it or something, we'll...
Possibly spam.
Yeah, we'll release them and put them back in there so people can kind of look and talk a little bit about the election cycle. We're curious to hear what you guys think about it so far.
Yeah.
Cool? All right. So we'll be back.
So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll smile. Bye!
Bye, guys.